Welcome to this edition of News Today, a series where we briefly discuss and analyze important news of the day. Without delay, let's explore the headlines first. Government declares Jamaat-e-Islami Jammu and Kashmir JEI as an unlawful association for a further period of 5 years. Prime Minister has inaugurated 3 space infrastructure projects in Kerala worth around Rs 1,800 crores. Expert Committee on Arbitration Law submitted its report to Union Ministry of Law and Justice. Department of Biotechnology DBT announced completion of sequencing 10,000 human genome. Government has notified methodology for calculation of green credits GC for tree plantation activity. A recent study has estimated the value of Antarctic and Southern Ocean ANSO ecosystem services. In the very first news, government declares Jamaat-e-Islami Jammu and Kashmir JEI as an unlawful association for a further period of 5 years. Before we begin, let us understand what is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act UAPA 1967. The Act provides for effective prevention of certain unlawful activities of individuals and associations and for dealing with terrorist activities. The UAP Amendment Act 2019 empowered the government to designate individuals as terrorists in addition to organizations. It also added International Convention for Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism 2005 to define terrorist acts. Coming back to the latest development, the notification issued by Union Ministry of Home Affairs MHA under Section 3 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act UAPA 1967. Previously, JEI was banned in February 2019. Here are the reasons for declaration of it as an unlawful association. JEI is continuing to be involved in fomenting terrorism and anti-India propaganda for fueling secessionism in Jammu and Kashmir, which are prejudicial to internal security and public order and have potential of disrupting unity and integrity of the country. JEI members are often alleged to be working as overground workers, OGW. Overground workers are people who provide logistic support to militants and assist them in their surreptitious movement. The roles played by OGWs for terrorist organizations are of recruitment, recruiting local youth for joining terrorist ranks including forced recruitments, then funding through illegal trade, counterfeit currency, tax evasion, hawala transactions and more. Also, they help in coordination with other stakeholders such as secessionist leaders, organized crime networks and more. Lastly, legitimization through propaganda, radicalization, exploitation of local grievances and more. The measures taken to neutralize influence of OGWs include rehabilitating orphans and women to ensure social welfare like the Operation Sadbhavna or Goodwill, improve intelligence infrastructure to keep track of radicalization attempts, fast-track courts for speedy conviction of terrorists and OGWs and more.
Moving on to the next news. Prime Minister has inaugurated 3 space infrastructure projects in Kerala worth around Rs 1,800 crores. During PM's visit to Vikram Sarabhai Space Centre in Thiruvananthapuram, projects were launched to reform the country's space sector. Let's start by first discussing about the 3 projects. These include SLV Integration Facility at Satish Dhawan Space Centre, Sriharikota, to boost the frequency of Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle or PSLV launches from 6 to 15 per year. It also caters to launches of the Small Satellite Launch Vehicle or SSLV and other small launch vehicle designed by private space companies. PSLV is a 4-stage launch vehicle capable of launching satellites into geosynchronous and geostationary orbits. SSLV is a 3-stage launch vehicle capable of launching satellites in low Earth orbit at low cost. Second is Semi-Cryogenics Integrated Engine and Stage Test Facility at ISRO Propulsion Complex at Mahendragiri will enable development of semi-cryogenic engines and stages which will increase payload capability of present launch vehicles. This facility is equipped with liquid oxygen and kerosene supply systems to test engines up to 200 tons of thrust. Trisonic Wind Tunnel at VSSC for aerodynamic testing for characterization of rockets and aircraft during flight in atmospheric regime. Lastly, Prime Minister also reviewed Gaganyaan mission progress, India's first human spaceflight mission, and bestowed astronaut wings to 4 astronaut designates which symbolize trust, courage and discipline. At last, now let's discuss and know about Vikram Sarabhai Space Centre. It is the lead center of Indian Space Research Organization under the Department of Space. It is named in memory of Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, the father of the Indian space program. The Virtual Launch Control Center at Vikram Sarabhai Space Center played an important role in the launch of the LVM-3 vehicle carrying the Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft. Also, VLCC remotely carries out system checks on launch vehicles prior to mission.
In another news, Expert Committee on Arbitration Law submitted its report to Union Ministry of Law and Justice. The committee was set up in June 2023 to examine working of arbitration law in the country and recommend reforms to Arbitration and Conciliation ANC Act 1996. What does arbitration mean? It is a quasi-judicial proceeding wherein parties in dispute appoint an arbitrator by agreement to adjudicate the dispute. It is a type of alternate dispute resolution. Let's understand what is alternate dispute resolution, ADR. It is a method of settling disputes without formal litigation. It includes various mechanisms such as arbitration, negotiation, mediation, conciliation, facilitated settlements, ombudsman, and more. Further, here are the key recommendations of the committee. It suggested for setting up of separate arbitration division in high courts, and the government may earmark separate funds for select high courts having heavy pendency of arbitration cases. It also suggested for separate laws for domestic arbitration and international arbitration in the long run, and greater supervision by courts is required given varied forms of domestic arbitration. It recommended diversity in arbitral appointments, as arbitral institutions must strive to impanel and appoint significantly more women arbitrators to arbitral panels. It also called for arbitration in special economic zones and Gujarat International Finance Tech Cities by creation of an arbitration ecosystem in SEZs with speedy visa facilitations for international arbitrators. Lastly, for virtual arbitration and artificial intelligence, the committee recommended to wait for and evaluate the effect of migration of arbitrations to virtual mode and assess further development in arbitrations using artificial intelligence.
In our next news, Department of Biotechnology announced completion of sequencing 10,000 human genome. Before we begin, let us understand what is a genome and its sequencing. Genome is the entire set of DNA instructions found in a cell. In humans, it comprises 23 pairs of chromosomes in cell's nucleus and small chromosome in cell's mitochondria. Deoxyribonucleic acid or DNA is a molecule that carries genetic information for functioning of an organism. DNA contains unique chemical codes determined by the order of adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine, which are 4 nucleotide bases present in DNA. Genome sequencing refers to figuring out of the order of DNA nucleotides in a genome. Coming to the achievement of Department of Biotechnology, the sequencing of the whole genome of 10,000 healthy individuals from 99 communities of diverse Indian populations was completed under the Genome India Project or GIP. GIP, inspired by the Human Genome Project, was launched and funded by the Department of Biotechnology under the Ministry of Science and Technology in 2020 to collect 10,000 genetic samples from citizens across India to build a reference genome. It is a consortium of 20 national institutes and led by Centre for Brain Research, Bangalore-based Indian Institute of Science. If we talk about the significance of GIP, then it includes creating a database of Indian genomes that can help researchers to learn about genetic variants that are unique to India's population groups and use that to customize drugs and therapies. At last, we will also have a look at some other initiatives for genome sequencing. Human Genome Project, launched in 1990 and completed in 2003, covered about 92% of total human genome sequence. Next is IntiGen program to undertake whole genome sequencing of thousands of individuals representing diverse ethnic groups from India. And at last, there is Global Alliance for Genomics and Health set standards to expand genomic data used within a human rights framework. In our next news, government has notified methodology for calculation of green credits for tree plantation activity. On recommendation of Indian Council of Forestry, Research and Education or ICFRE, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change notified following methodologies in pursuance of Green Credits Rules 2023. The Forest Department of every state and union territory shall identify degraded land parcels under their administrative control for increasing green cover. Land parcels identified for plantation must be free from all encumbrances and must have a size of 5 hectares or above. Indian Council of Forestry Research and Education directs the Forest Department to carry out tree plantation within 2 years. Indian Council of Forestry Research and Education issues green credits. One grown tree will amount to one green credit, subject to minimum density of 1100 trees per hectare. If we talk about green credits, then this refers to a unit of an incentive provided for a specified activity delivering a positive impact on the environment. Tree plantation is one of the 8 activities under the Green Credit Program or GCP. GCP aims to incentivize environmental positive actions through market-based mechanism and generate GC which shall be tradable and made available for trading on a domestic market platform. ICFRE serves as GCP administrator responsible for program implementation, management, monitoring and operation. Further, if we talk about ICFRE, then it is a society registered under Societies Registration Act 1860 and an autonomous body as declared by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Its headquarters is in Dehradun. At last, let's have a look at some other sectors identified for Green Credit Program. These are water conservation, sustainable agriculture, water management, air pollution reduction, mangrove conservation and reduction, eco-mark label development, and sustainable building and infrastructure.
In another news, let's understand about the value of Antarctic and Southern Ocean ANSO ecosystem services. A recent study published in a journal estimated economic value of ecosystem services of Antarctic and Southern Ocean at around $180 billion per annum. Ecosystem services are defined as the direct and indirect contributions of ecosystems to human well-being and have an impact on our survival and quality of life. Let's look at the ecosystem services provided by the Antarctic and Southern Ocean. Provisional services, characterized by ability of humans to obtain products from ecosystem like Antarctic toothfish and krill used as food for humans, high-value pharmaceuticals and more. Next, the regulating services, benefits obtained from natural processes and functioning of ecosystems such as climate regulation, natural hazard regulation and more, like the Southern Ocean absorbs carbon dioxide from atmosphere and helps transport water around the globe. Lastly, the cultural services, non-material benefits obtained by people from ecosystems such as spiritual enrichment, recreation and more, like tourism and scientific research in Antarctica. Here is how the governance of Antarctica and Southern Ocean works. The Antarctic Treaty 1959 applies to area south of 60 degrees south latitude, stipulates peaceful use of Antarctica. And the Antarctic Treaty System that comprises the treaty itself and a number of related agreements related to scientific cooperation, protection of Antarctic environment and more. Let's look at India's interest in Antarctic and Southern Ocean. In terms of scientific research, we have 2 operational research centers in Antarctica, Maitri, 1989 and Bharati, 2012. Another, Dakshin Gangotri, was decommissioned in 1990. Second, the Indian Antarctic Act 2022, aimed at having India's own national measures for protecting Antarctic environment and associated ecosystem. Lastly, India is a signatory to Convention on the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources and Madrid Protocol.
The place in news for today is Sweden with its capital Stockholm. It is in the news as Sweden is set to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO. Talking about its political boundaries, it is located on Scandinavian Peninsula in Northern Europe. It shares land border with Finland and Norway. It shares maritime borders with Denmark, Germany, Poland, Russia, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, and is bounded by Baltic Sea, Gulf of Bothnia, Kattegat, Skagerrak and Øresund Straits. Talking about its geographical features, its highest point is Kebnekaise, its largest lake is Vänern, its major rivers are Ton, Dal and Ume. Natural resources like iron ore, copper, lead, zinc, gold, silver, tungsten and uranium are found in abundance there.
As we conclude today's main news, let's take a look at some quick updates. Ministry of Education MOE launched Swayam Plus platform. Swayam is massive open online course platform providing educational opportunities for learners. It is in alignment with National Education Policy 2020 and will now include courses supporting industry needs that enhance learners' employability in collaboration with industry leaders. Prime Minister laid the foundation stone for redevelopment of 554 railway stations under Amrit Bharat Station Scheme. Launched under Ministry of Railways, it aims to enhance and modernize railway stations throughout Indian railway network. WTO and International Trade Center ITC launched a $50 million global fund called WEIDE Fund. Objectives of the fund is to assist women-led businesses and entrepreneurs in developing economies and least developed countries in adopting digital technologies and expanding online presence. African Union established Africa Club, also known as Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, at its 37th summit. Africa Club seeks to introduce innovative financial instruments and provide a venue for debt management discussions. European Parliament adopted Nature Restoration Law (NRL) to restore 20% of EU's land and sea. NRL will restore degraded ecosystems in all member states. It is a key element of the EU biodiversity strategy, which calls for binding targets to restore degraded ecosystems. At Climate and Clean Air Ministerial 2023, Climate and Clean Air Coalition launched Clean Air Flagship Program. It is aimed to achieve cleaner air consistent with improved WHO air quality interim targets, reduce emissions of short-lived climate pollutants. Representative concentration pathways (RCPs) have emerged as one of the latest approach to determine emission scenario. RCPs describe 4 different 21st century pathways of greenhouse gas emissions and atmospheric concentration, air pollutant emissions, and land use. Belgium has become the first country in Europe to recognize ecocide as a national as well as an international crime. Ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment. Before we go, it's time to put your knowledge to the test in today's segment of Test Your Learning. Thank you for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of News Today. To get the answers to today's quiz and to download the PDF of News Today, make sure to check out the link in the description below.